Hey moms and dads, it's Dr. Scott. And if you read the tagline here, I have a question. So would you consider better adaptability to stress to be a success along with better connection in kids that struggle with autism, ADHD, and SPD? Because I think the answer to that question really and truly is, it depends, right? If we're looking for a child to be able to function better in school, then their ability to handle the stress that comes along with school absolutely is going to be an improvement, right? They're functioning better because they can manage their stress better and more effectively. In a child who is struggling with autism, having better connection, right, the ability to connect to other individuals obviously is going to be considered a success. In a child that is struggling with sensory processing, right, their adaptability to new stressors, their ability to handle the world around them is going to be measured as a success. Thank you very much for the thumbs up. So when I look at this as a clinician, my first take is not always, are we going to be able to fix every problem that comes our way or get every child to be the perfect, functioning, optimal child that we want? We know that based upon where a child comes in, that may not be feasible. But if quality of life is our focus, if our ability to help a child to adapt to the stressors of the world around them so that they can manage meltdowns, so that they can function in the environment, not have every situation, every transition stress them out to the point where they have a meltdown in public and mom and dad can't go out because they're afraid of what's going to happen. I consider that a success. If you have a child who's in school who can make a transition from one classroom setting to another and it's not stressing them out and they're still able to move on quickly, or if they do have a point where they need to step away for a second, it's shorter than what it was, I consider that a success. Right? So the answer to that question is always, it depends. It depends upon what our goal for the child is, what our expectation for the child is. Because the understanding is that every child that comes in that's looking for treatment in our office or in an OT's office or in an SLP's office, it's the expectation has to match what we realistically can achieve, right? And so when a child who's older, obviously the expectations are going to be a little bit different. It's going to take a longer time to go and hit maximum adaptability, but we can still make gradual and progressive changes in the way they're adapting to their situations. In older autistic children, it's always the ultimate goal is to help them to be able to function and connect in the world, because if they can connect, if they can adapt and they can transition, then it's going to make it much easier for them to function in the world around them, as obviously they have to be in situations where they require greater levels of independence. In a child who is struggling in school with ADHD, if we can help them so that they can be more adaptable, they can be focused, then those things become bigger and bigger in significance. Now, considering that obviously the goal is to be able to get the maximum result that you can with every child, then one of the biggest things that we have to consider is how changeable still is their nervous system. The younger a child is, the more pliable the nervous system is, the higher maximum result that in any type of a treatment, whether it's pediatric chiropractic, occupational therapy, speech and language pathology, neurological rehab of any type, the greater the long-term expectation for resolution is going to become, because you've got a lot more pliable brain. So obviously for us, the younger that we can work with a child, the better the long-term result is going to be for getting restoration of full function. But, considering that that's not always the case, then we set an expectation level that's reasonable, knowing that the older the child is, that it's going to take longer to go and get maximum progress, but at the same time, we still have significant upside because we can progressively get their brain to slow down, handle stressors better, give them the extra step that's necessary, right? Because moms and dads, if you're living with this, you know what I'm talking about. They don't have that extra step oftentimes. It's situational stress equals meltdown, aggression, degrading of behavior, right? And if you're hearing this, obviously, give me a thumbs up if this is something that you struggle with. Because the goal is then to help them so that we can get a step in between where stressor occurs, the brain now sends information up into the higher centers of the brain called the cortex, where the executive decision is made, and all of a sudden that extra step creates a process that changes that behavior, so the algorithm goes not just to fight or flight, but maybe I should have a different reaction. Maybe I don't need to be aggressive, and the pathway starts to diverge. And giving the child that step helps to go and change the behavior. We've witnessed this with a number of kids. We had a young man who had a lot of aggression issues, and one of the things that we noticed right away with him is that when the extra step occurred, where he would normally go into attack mode against his parents or the staff or whatever, what we noticed right away was then all of a sudden, when he would normally grab his mom's hair, when he normally would have headbutted her or hit her or clawed at her. All of a sudden he grabbed, he looked, realized what he was about to do, and the extra step happened and he let go. And he made the decision not to do anything that was more aggressive because that extra step was all of a sudden there in his decision process. That's a big neurological change because his brain all of a sudden slowed down enough to know that I need to change what I'm doing because there's no need for the level of aggression that he was feeling initially. So his behavior changed because his brain slowed down, his adaptability to the situation, and his level of connection, meaning his brain had an extra step in the process that told him not to do that. That's an improvement in connection, wouldn't you agree? So when you look at functional changes in a child, we always look at how far can we go, what's important to us when we're working with a child, what do we expect? And the expectation, again, is always it depends. Moms and dads, I know that if you're watching this video, then there's probably somebody who you're connected to, maybe your own child, that has dealt with some of these struggles. Part of our mission, our greater purpose, is to make sure that we are helping moms and dads understand that there is a process that's involved in this, and the goal is to understand what the process is, where it began, how severe it is, so we can create an algorithm to start to unwind the child's nervous system and slow it down. I see a question out here. How do we create an extra step or get him to slow down to think about it? Shannon, that's a great question. So for those of you who are watching this who don't know what I do, okay? So my job as a pediatric chiropractor is I specialize in working with kids that have neurological challenges, right? Neurodevelopmental disorders, autism, ADHD, sensory processing, but also even kids who start further back where, it's the colic kid and the ear infection kid that oftentimes can dissociate down the road into those things. Because we know these are processes that start early and then can go further and further down the road if not stopped. So now, for those of you who are watching this, and I see some of my patients out here, what we do is we adjust, right? Because the adjustment's job is pretty simple. The adjustment's job is to create a process where the brain starts to slow down. And so in that process, when we put stimulation into the nervous system by a very gentle, very specific adjustment, it allows the brain to calm down temporarily. And then when they go to bed that night, their brain starts rewriting the processes, saying, okay, I slowed down for a little while, and the brain knows that optimum function occurs when there's balance in the nervous system. So what we do is we continuously introduce the adjustment, which calms down the nervous system via a nerve called the vagus nerve, VAGUS, if you want to go and do some research. The vagus nerve is the window up into the brain. When we do an adjustment, that stimulation travels up the vagus nerve and it affects an area of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where all executive function lives. So if we can tap the brake pedal by doing the adjustment, slow down the fight or flight system by bringing it back into balance, eventually what starts to happen, the two systems start to get into a more homeostatic position where the fight or flight system only responds appropriately, coming down from being up here, where every decision is made from fight or flight, and the rest, digest, growth, development, healing, learning system, the parasympathetic system, begins to come back online. And we see the extra step comes when that system, the parasympathetic system, is staying engaged, okay? And so part of what our process is that we go through and we do scans that allow us to assess where a child's nervous system is. One of the tests that I really love is a thing that's called a heart rate variability. And if anybody here is an exercise phys or has worked with this before, heart rate variability tests help us to see how a nervous system is balanced. When we do it, we'll put either an ear clip on or use finger probes where it'll measure the output of the brain. And the brain is then putting out signals that are going into the heart, being measured via the vagus nerve. Because the job of the vagus nerve is to depress the heart rate, calm it down. So when you have a fight or flight event, the vagus nerve sends signals to the heart to slow it back down and bring down blood pressure, bring down stress response. What this test does is it measures that so we can get an algorithm to see if one is overpowering the other. And then we can see it graphically and we can see numbers in association with what this looks like so we know how significant the stress wiring is in a child's or an adult's brain. So then as we go through and we implement care, we go and do it in phases. And phases are done so that we have a marker time where we allow for change. And that marker time, we tend to typically give around 4 weeks of care between retesting so that we give the brain time to actually make a change that's sustainable. Because what has to happen for the brain to actually change a process is it's 21 to 28 days for the brain to rewrite the program, and then we can remeasure to see how this has affected all of the involved systems. So one of the tests at HRV will have time to go and make a shift so we can see improvements in adaptability to stress. So if If anyone has ever seen our perfect storm presentation that we have on there, I talk about this quite a bit. We look at a lot of patterning, and the patterns tell us the way that the nervous system is wired. In kids that have like ADHD, we have a pattern that we refer to as a raging bull pattern. If you're a mom and dad of an ADHD kid, you know why it's called raging bull. But we can see the electrical energy output that a child's brain is putting in to just keep them upright, because these kids oftentimes tend to have a lot of energy they're exerting to try and keep the posture just upright, which is what makes them so rigid, oftentimes very tense, and having tons of overflow movements, right? The kid who's like this, or smiling every time he's trying to do an activity, or has lots of extra hand motions and stuff like that, and is always spinning 1,000,000 miles an hour. Or really low-tone kids, like your kids with dyspraxia and sensory processing issues, we tend to see very low tone on those energy tests that come through the lower part of the spine and core, but tons of energy from the top and bottom of the spine. And it tells us what we're working with, so we have an idea as to how to create a plan to get the stimulation up in the right areas and down in the other areas. So that's kind of how the algorithm works. And then we can see from another scan called a thermal scan, the organization of the autonomic nervous system, by being able to go and see basically how the brain is utilizing energy that's going out through the nerves and maintenance of the body. So it helps us with our ability to see what's going on, and then understand how many steps it's going to really take to get the nervous system to balance out the way that we want it to, and then create a plan that's going to get the result that we desire. For those of you who are watching this, or those of you who are seeing the recording, my personal mentor, Dr. Tony Ebel, is actually doing a pretty in-depth talk about this that is going to be not today, but a week from today, where he's going to dig in very heavy into this information. I would encourage each of you to go to the link that's beneath this to register for that, because our goal is to educate as many of you as we can about the process, because I know many of you struggle with why your kids are having these struggles, and what you can do to best affect change in them in the best ways possible. Go ahead and register for it. It's a free webinar. You can get the information, share it with your friends and loved ones too, because obviously so many people that are in the circle of care of your child, they oftentimes will really value this information, because they'll understand too where it starts. And then you're welcome, Shannon. And then as you're going through the process of helping your child to get the care that they need, they'll understand the why, which is really important. So as you're doing this, it helps everyone to understand what care is doing, how it's working, why their brain is going through this process, because we talk about things like disorganization before reorganization, that the brain has to kind of rewrite all the programs, and sometimes it doesn't look great on the outside, even though it's getting better on the inside. And then we see this big upward improvement in all of their function. So things like that he's going to talk about. So I would encourage you, because it's very specifically targeted to things like the ADHD and the SPDs, and how to go and really get more information about what is going on. So if anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to drop them down here. I'm more than happy to respond to questions, or personal message me. I know a lot of you have in the past. Please feel free to continue. Let's see here. Will impulse control improve once alignment is achieved? So the question on that's a good answer. So impulse control is also a step that occurs in the prefrontal cortex. Now, depending upon the age of the child that's having the issue, it becomes twofold, right? If it's something the child is now wired in as a behavior, then it becomes that much more important to then stress the significance of consequence of the behavior to alter that, okay? Because a younger child, straight impulse control is more just lack of connection from impulse to consequence, and an older child, they need to then have more reinforcement about the consequence, and the loop that it takes to go and stop that is constant, consistent reinforcement to get their behavior to change. So because now there's an extra step of connection that they have, and so impulse control will come now with more correction. Okay? Hope this was helpful for you, Rachel. If anyone has any other questions, don't hesitate to chime in here. Again, send me a personal message, but make sure that you get registered for the webinar. I think you'll find it very valuable. And make sure that you please share this with your loved ones or friends in the community that work with this, because we want to get as many people to understand that there are really a lot more things available besides having to go down the road. You're welcome, Rachel, of having to go and use the medications to improve your child's function. Okay? This is Dr. Scott. Hi, Beverly. Let's see, hurricane right now. Both of my kids are losing it, 17-year-old and 13 years old. Help. Boy, Beverly, I wish I can come down there and help by adjusting your kids. If you guys are making your way up to Cleveland, come up here and see me, and we'll make sure we get them in and help them with their adaptation strategies, okay? Biggest thing I could tell you guys right now is the best way for them to consciously activate their rest and digest system is through their breath. Focusing on what's called deep diaphragmatic breathing, not chest breathing, which is, we oftentimes will teach our patients that you want hand on chest, hand on belly, and make sure that only the hand on the belly moves, oftentimes starting by breathing through a straw. And only the belly expands. conscious breath going on a cadence of 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out actually will help them to activate their rest and digest system, dampening their stress response, giving them more logical control of the situation. So obviously you guys are in dire straits down there, but helping with just simple deep diaphragmatic breathing, if you can get them to practice that, it will help them to better adapt to the stress in the moment, because they will be able to go and get more logic back into their brain and suppress the stress response more, okay? Guys, I'm gonna get out of here so I can go and see my kiddos and hang out with the staff here for a second before I go. But again, feel free to message me, make sure you guys get set up for the other webinar. And do me a favor, please continue sharing this. We really wanna make sure we reach as many moms and dads as we can, okay? Guys, out of here, good night, God bless, be elite.